Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I'm part of Power to Fly's hosting team, and I am, as always, incredibly excited to get started on our upcoming Power to Fly Chat and Learn event. Now, a couple quick housekeeping items, just important for y'all, especially if maybe this is your first Power to Fly event, in which case, hi, nice to meet you. So happy to have you here. Or maybe if you are a frequent flyer with us, but you haven't joined us for a chat in a while. So the biggest thing to know is that this event is all about you. It's about our community members and making sure that you all get the information, content that you came to get today. So you are encouraged to participate in a couple different ways, depending on what you prefer to do. You are always welcome to turn your cameras on if you would like to share your smiling, maskless faces with us safely. No requirement, there's no pressure if you don't want to, completely understand. Just know that it does not matter if you are coming to us from a corner office or a corner in your closet. Like, it is totally fine. We want to meet you where you are. So please don't feel the need to stand on ceremony. We want to be there for you at every stage of your career, and today is no different. So however you show up for work, show up here, and we would love to see you. Now, I do want to let y'all know that if you do turn your cameras on today, if you have any kind of like privacy concerns, as long as you don't come off mute, you won't show up on either the live stream or the recording of today's session. Now, regardless of whether you decide to participate with cameras or not, you are always welcome to add questions or comments into the Zoom group chat. You are also welcome to DM me if you'd like to ask a question or raise a comment, but keep yourself anonymous. No problems there. And like I said, today's session is being recorded. So what that means for you is that you get to kick back, relax. You don't have to take notes. You get to enjoy the presentation from Lorraine, and you don't have to worry about missing out on a reference or a link that someone shares. Now, the good news about all of this is that everybody that registered for today's session is going to get an email from Powerfly in about 1 to 2 business days to where you can rewatch this recording on our website. Now, from the website, you can search our entire archive of chats, everything that's happened from the inception of Chat and Learns. So super, super great option and a really great resource that you can explore there as well. Now, let's say that Lorraine tells you something, as she always does, that is just mind-blowing, great advice. You cannot wait to send this tip on to a friend or a coworker or relative. You don't have to wait the 1 to 2 business days. And granted, keep in mind, that's probably going to be Monday or Tuesday of next week. So if you don't want to wait that long, you can always head over to our YouTube channel. I'll be sharing the links for all of these things in the channel, in the group chat in just a little bit here. But you can always head over to our YouTube channel. We have the live stream going there. Hi, YouTube. The recording is posted to our channel, usually within about 5 to 15 minutes of the end of that live stream. So available a lot sooner. Now, we do have a section of our recorded chats that are available on our YouTube channel. So you're always welcome to go and view those, share, whatever you'd like to do. But just know that the full archives are going to be on our website, along with a ton of other great resources and information. Now, I did say if you do want to ask questions, please feel free to DM if you have any kind of privacy concerns there, not a problem. I encourage you to keep the chat hopping, introduce yourself, network with other professionals, let us know where you're joining us from in the world today. I'm coming to you from Toledo, Ohio. Historically, that has been land of the Kickapoo, Fox, and I never remember the last one, tribes, at least in the Ohio area. So let us know where you're joining from. I always like to see how far across the country or the world our audience spreads today. Last but not least, like I said, we have a YouTube channel. We are also at Powerfly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, in addition to YouTube. Now, I said I recommend that you follow us on those various channels or subscribe, whatever you'd like to do. You don't have to, obviously, but if you do, and if you are as committed as we are to spreading our audience, increasing our reach, making these resources available to as many people as possible, and you want to help out with that goal, we would love it. So if you want, please feel free to take photos or video as we go today. Let your social media network know that you are learning and upskilling with Power to Fly. If you would like to, you can feel free to tag us. You can also use our hashtag Power to Fly. And we would love to retweet, reshare, repost anything that you share with us. So please feel free. Anything we can do to get these resources in the hands of more people, but kind of the better we can do there. Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to today's speaker. Now, many of you will recognize Lorraine. She has joined us on chats in the past. They're always fabulous, very informative, really entertaining. I cannot wait for you to get to experience her all over again, or possibly for the first time if you are just now joining us. So Lorraine Lee is a top-rated virtual keynote speaker, as well as a leader at the intersection of editorial and tech. Now, Lorraine has more than 300,000 followers on LinkedIn, and she's passionate about helping professionals to accelerate their careers and stand out in the virtual office space. Now, as a speaker, Lorraine has been invited to Fortune 500 companies, tech firms, government orgs, and many more. Lorraine is the head of editorial at Prezi and is a LinkedIn learning instructor for the popular course Virtual and Hybrid Meeting Essentials. She has also been featured in publications including Inc., Read Write, and Entrepreneur. Prior to Prezi, Lorraine was an editor at LinkedIn. Lorraine, I am so happy to have you back to the stage today. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience before we talk about the main takeaways for today?
No, I think you covered it all. I'm really excited to be back again.
Excellent. All right. Now, if y'all have not had the experience of getting to watch Lorraine speak or listen to Lorraine speak, you're in for a treat. But before we dive into questions or dive into, Lorraine wants to chat with y'all first a bit. Before we dive in, I just want to reiterate some of the key points and the takeaways you can expect to get from today's session. Now, again, we identified these by looking at the questions you all sent in, but if you took time out of your day to be here with us, we want to make sure that the time that you spend with Power to Fly is well worth it. So take advantage of the reward that you get for being here live, being here for the recording. You have the opportunity to drive today's conversation. So please feel free, take advantage. If you have questions, if Lorraine mentions a term or an idea or something that you want her to expand on, let us know in the group chat. If you wrote in a question and you're not sure if we'll get to it, send it into the chat. Again, you can always DM me, not a problem there, but I'll just send these questions in. Maybe we're going to go over one of your questions and there's some extra detail or context you think we should use or should have to give you a great answer. Let us know that in the group chat. I want to make sure that we get you the answers you came for today, and the best way to do that is to ask. So we're going to cover.
Meg, I actually want to jump in. No worries. So actually, this is a slide from my last Chat and Learn, which was just the other week. So that one was focused more on standing out on video. But for this session, we're going to be focused all about meetings and how to facilitate meetings, how to get your team engaged and not dreading every meeting that you're facilitating. So that's going to be our focus for today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that dial in. So within our topic, we're going to talk about some ways that you can appear more confident and competent while you're on video. We're going to touch on some tips and tricks to help keep your audience engaged with your content. And then we're going to discuss some best practices to help optimize your video presence. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Lorraine, I'm going to highlight you so that way we get the chance to take full, to get the full effect of your presentation. So I'm going to sit back, seat, take it away.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Meg, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. I love meetings. Let me clarify. I love great meetings. Those meetings where the facilitator shows up prepared, everyone gets a chance to chime in, and we actually have clear takeaways. Unfortunately, most meetings these days, especially those that are remote or hybrid, are the opposite of this. Now, give me a +1 in the chat. I'd love to hear from all of you if you are also frustrated with meetings in their current state. Or if you are having amazing meetings, give me a +100. +1 if you are frustrated with the meetings you're in right now. +100 if you just love meetings, you have the perfect meetings. Oh, Meg, +100, that's awesome. Anyone else want to chime in? +1 if you're not such a big fan of your meetings, +100 if you're loving them.
Ooh, Valerie, wishing you luck. Fingers
Nice.
crossed for you, girl. Hit and miss from Jamie, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, looks like we have a mix here, and it kind of depends on the circumstance, depends on who's facilitating the meeting and who's in the meeting. That makes a lot of sense. Now, the thing is, whether you're a +1 or a +100, meetings are not going away anytime soon, and I don't think that they should. However, the issue is that more and more seem to be getting added to our calendars, and they're becoming less and less effective, leading to things like burnout, Zoom fatigue, and ineffective communication. Now, there are a lot of reasons that can make a meeting ineffective, and I'm sure you've all experienced your fair share. Maybe the facilitator is speaking at you, and they're not inviting you into the conversation. There's no clear agenda and everyone is just talking in circles. You've been raising your hand remotely and everyone else is just having a conversation amongst themselves in person and they aren't noticing you. Or my favorite, the meeting didn't really need to be live and it should have been an email instead. So in this session, I'm going to be talking for about 10 minutes here. You'll learn how to positively transform your meetings so they shift away from situations like these ones here to ones where others are actually going to be complimenting you on how effective and inclusive your meetings are. Let's take a look at the data to see what lies ahead when it comes to hybrid work and meetings. 55% of employees prefer to work remotely at least 3 days per week. 96% of people who started working remotely due to COVID want to continue working remotely at least some of the time for the rest of their careers. And we have 250% more meetings every day than we did pre-pandemic. And we are also spending more than half of our standard work week in meetings for a total of 21 and a half hours. So that's a 7.3-hour increase per week since the pandemic started. So what we're seeing here through the data is that there is a lot of remote and hybrid work in our futures, and there's going to be a big meeting problem if we don't fix it. And before we dive into the tips, I want to share a little bit more about who I am and why I'm here talking about meetings. As Meg mentioned, my name is Lorraine. I'm the head of editorial at Prezi, a presentation and collaboration solution being used by the majority of the Fortune 1000 to make their meetings better. I'm also a LinkedIn learning instructor of the popular course Virtual and Hybrid Meeting Essentials, and I was an editor at LinkedIn for 6 years where I worked on its video products. Now, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. As Meg said, you can tag me on socials, tag Power to Fly on socials, and let's keep the conversation going even after we leave the Zoom today. So let's talk about what we'll be covering today. Today, we'll be talking about 5 things you need to incorporate into your meetings across 2 key areas: planning and preparation, and driving engagement both during and after the meeting. And then we'll close out with a quick recap before we start Q&A. The first thing we'll start with is the agenda, which is so foundational to any meeting. If I don't see an agenda in a meeting invite these days, I just don't bother accepting it. That's because without an agenda, it's essentially a guarantee that the meeting is going to be unfocused and unproductive. And when you create your agenda, you'll always want to include your goal. And I actually had a colleague when I was at LinkedIn who would start off every meeting with the phrase, "This meeting will be a success if," fill in the blank. And I remember when she first said it, I thought it sounded kind of funny to be so explicit about it, but it actually really did keep us focused and kept us on point. Now, after you come up with your goal, I like to recommend including no more than 3 items for every 30-minute meeting to ensure that you have enough time to discuss each item. And again, you want the conversation to remain focused. With each agenda item, take it a step further and indicate how much time each discussion topic should take. And jot down what the clock should read so that you're not having to do math in your head while facilitating. So this is an agenda I created in the past. I consider it to be a pretty good one. And you'll see here I have it broken up by time and by topic. And it's going to take a little bit of extra work, probably more than what some of you might be used to. But it's going to be less work than if you had to schedule multiple additional follow-up meetings because you didn't really get to the point and get to your goal to begin with. Next, let's talk about rules of engagement. I like to recommend that above 4 participants, you really should encourage everyone to be using the hand raise feature. And this is really important to ensure that all voices are included. When it comes to hybrid meetings, you may have heard something called proximity bias, which is when leaders tend to favor those who are physically closer to them. Now, if we keep this in mind, these rules of engagement become even more critical to ensure that it's not going to be just a conversation between those who are in the physical room who can see each other face to face, drowning out the voice of the remote attendees. Now, beyond the hand raise feature, it's also important to call out other ways that people can participate, which again is an important consideration to include all personality types, especially introverts. For example, I like to encourage people to use the chat feature or to use something like Prezi's on-screen responses to contribute. And the thing I'd point out here is that if you're leading the meeting, facilitating the meeting, just make sure that when you see something in the chat, when you see something on someone's screen, that you're acknowledging it and just so that they know that they're being heard and it's not just the loud people unmuting and speaking up or people in the room who get the acknowledgement. Once you've decided on your rules of engagement, don't forget to add these rules into your agenda and also state them at the start of the call so everyone is on the same page. Next, let's dive into what we need to drive engagement during and after our meetings. So we'll start with the passive to active meeting framework. I created this framework to break down the essential steps facilitators need to consider when leading a video call. The first step is to warm up the crowd. And if that kind of sounds like you're an entertainer with the warm-up, you are right. We now need to put on the hat of entertainer when we facilitate meetings and find new ways to engage people to get their energy levels up, especially when people are remote or when they're hybrid. And, for better or for worse, video requires us to do more than we did in person because video does mute energy on camera. So we really need to put in a little bit of extra effort. Also, I'm not sure about all of you on your calls, but when everyone joins a call and it's kind of awkwardly silent, or maybe there's just, small talk is always asking about the group's weekend or the weather, that's really setting the tone for the meeting, and people are already going to go into it kind of dreading it. So instead, you can do things like play music, maybe you have a question of the week to get things started, or you just ask more creative questions like, what are you working on right now that you're really excited about? The second step is to invite people to participate. Show that you want people's ideas and opinions by asking questions. You can also try things like maybe start off with a poll to get the juices flowing, or ask your teammates to write something down. After you invite them in, pause at least 5 seconds. Why 5 seconds? At least in American culture, 4 seconds is when people start getting uncomfortable. And I will just say it now, you're very likely to feel uncomfortable waiting for this amount of time, but you do get used to it after doing it enough times. I just bask in the awkward silences now, and I just think to myself, the longer I'm waiting, the more responses I'm gonna get because people won't be able to stand the silence. And someone usually speaks up at second 5, and that often triggers another thought or another question in someone else's head. Then you'll want to observe and listen. So repeat back what you're hearing to show that you're really tuned in. Maybe you label problems that you hear. You can lean in towards the screen for a physical indicator of engagement and note down areas that you might want to follow up on. Then you interact with your team by asking follow-up questions, building on top of what someone said, and at the very least, just simply thanking people for chiming in. I think we forget sometimes that video is still scary to a lot of people. It's still kind of uncomfortable. So, as a facilitator, as a leader, it's our job to create a safe space and make sure that people feel comfortable and valued. Now, once you hit the interact step, we're going to start back at the invite step again. Another way that we can ensure engagement is through having a robust hybrid toolkit. We hear a lot of people talking about Zoom fatigue and video burnout, but I really believe that this is because people aren't using virtual to its full potential. We are on video, but we are using it in the worst ways possible with things like screen shares and ineffective ways to collaborate. And we're not tired of video. We all love video. I watch so much Netflix and Hulu and HBO, and I'm sure many of you watch a lot of video too. So we can see that video isn't the problem. I wanted to share a few of my favorite tools with you to make your hybrid collaboration better. There's Atlassian, which can be used in a number of ways. They have internal wiki-like pages, a project management system, and more. Slido is a Q&A polling tool, and you can upvote and downvote questions, which is really helpful. They have word clouds, they have polls and other fun functionality, and it's also a great tool to send both before, during, and after meetings for that added engagement. We have Menti, which is a pretty similar tool. Figma for collaborating on designs. Poly, if any of you are Slack or Teams users, Poly is a great tool to send after a meeting. They have a meeting feedback template, so it's great to see how effective your meeting was. We have Prezi Video for more engaging meetings and presentations. And then there's a slew of other tools here to check out. So I'll just pause for a second in case anyone wants to take a screenshot and jot down these names. So let's talk about what to do after the live meeting is over. What you do after the meeting is just as important as what you do during it. And sometimes I like to say that it's even more important. So to start, I recommend creating temporary chat channels. And temporary chat channels are by far my favorite way to keep conversation in one place and to hold people accountable for their tasks. And I'm sure many of us have way too many channels. So what I like to do is actually include the word temp in the channel to indicate that this is something that's going to be archived after it's completed. This is an example of one I actually created and archived recently. Once your chat channel is set up, follow up the meeting with very, very clear and specific deadlines by mentioning both the day and the time you want something due to make sure your asks are crystal clear. So if I were to ask you all, can you give me feedback next week on this document? Would love to hear from all of you in the chat. What do you think I mean when I say next week? So someone comes to you at work, they ask you for feedback next week on a document. What does it mean to you? Okay, Khalid says by Wednesday, end of day. Anyone else have a interpretation of that? All right, Maria, Teresa both say end of day Friday. Meg says a week from the day they're asking. Elizabeth says Monday to Friday, early on Monday. Okay. So, I mean, this is great. You can see that there are many different interpretations for that. Now, what if I were to say, okay, can you send this to me by Wednesday next week? What time do you feel like I need that by? I know a lot of you were saying end of day before. Do you still think it's end of day when I give you a specific day of the week? By 5 p.m., Valerie says. Elizabeth says midnight. Yeah, a lot of you are saying end of the day. But, for me in this case, I actually want it by 12 p.m. PT. So you're just seeing the need to be really specific with meeting follow-ups to make sure that everyone's on the same page so that you're not wasting your time checking in with someone. Maybe I thought it was Tuesday and I'm checking in and I want it now and you thought you had till Wednesday, right? That just creates some unnecessary conflict on team. So again, this is one of my favorite tips. Be specific with both the day and the time and make sure to include the time zone. Right. Well, those were our 5 tips to have more impactful virtual and hybrid meetings. So I'm going to go into a quick recap and then we get to do Q&A. So please remember to create a detailed agenda with a goal, designate your rules of engagement, follow the passive to active meeting framework, set up your virtual toolkit, and define your post-meeting plan. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, if you have any additional questions after the session today, or you just want to connect, because I'm posting about meetings all the time, you can add me on LinkedIn. And if you're looking for more tips for how to accelerate your career and stand out in the virtual office, hope you'll subscribe to my newsletter at lorraineklee.com/newsletter, where I give a lot of quick actionable tips. And one more parting gift for you all, I have a lot of free resources on my site, including a 20-minute free course with more tips like these. So feel free to grab it at the link here. And I just want to reiterate, meetings are not something to be dreaded, and they're actually such a huge opportunity for you to be recognized as a confident, competent, and caring leader who leads highly effective and impactful teams. As you saw, there's so much that can go wrong with meetings, but if you can be the person to make those things go right, you're going to be well ahead of your peers. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you at a future meeting. And I will now pass it over back to Meg for Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lorraine. We do have a couple people asking if we could share that link in the chat. So if you have the ability to share it with me, I can make sure it goes out.
Yeah,
but thank you.
I'll type all these links as well. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Awesome. All right. So we got some really, really great questions for today's session. Obviously, Lorraine has hit the high points of a lot of what we're going to talk about. As we're going through and asking these questions, Lorraine, please feel free to tell me if you've kind of, expanded or expanded everything you want to talk about.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So let's talk about the differences between a hybrid meeting and a virtual meeting. Do you think that there are like specific, things like kind of hard and fast rules for what makes it what? Do you think it's just as easy? What are we actually talking about when we're talking about a virtual meeting versus a hybrid meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question to kick us off. So virtual means that everyone is calling remotely from wherever they might be in the world. Hybrid is a mix of people who are in person, so probably in the office together. And then you also have the remote attendees as well. And both of these are, I think, the future of meetings, the future of work. But we're also hearing a lot in the news about how hybrid is becoming kind of the model that many offices are trying to follow. And, the reason I get so passionate talking about this topic is because with hybrid, it takes more than just showing up to the office a few days a week. Like there are things that you have to consider, like meetings to make sure that everyone does feel included and like they are not a second-class citizen if they're remote. So I gave that tip before about designate rules of engagement, and that's really one of the key ones that are going to make sure that your hybrid meetings aren't chaotic with people just speaking up in the room and some people are trying to unmute and be heard. So it's about creating some structure and some guidelines around how these hybrid meetings are run.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of, breaking that down because like, not everybody's going to be in a hybrid space. And, even though we're 2+ years into the pandemic, it absolutely is. It's something people still struggle with. There's a lot of people that might not have had that experience yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. So let's talk about some of the ways about making an audience to, kind of helping an audience to actively participate, especially in the chat space. I do this all the time, and I can tell you there are some events that just kick off and there's an energy and everybody's in the chat and it's great. There are other times where it is pulling teeth, right? It's crickets. And sometimes it's great because I can tell y'all are really engaged. You're like, laser focused. But what they're kind of, we always want to find a balance there. So what do you recommend if people are trying to get that participation and it's not happening organically?
Sure. Well, the first thing, and I alluded to this in the passive to active meeting framework, is you do kind of have to set that tone right from the start, and you have to do something that's different and something that's interesting and catches attention. And you can't just do what you've always been doing before because people are tired, and video is not necessarily it doesn't give you that same feeling you have when you're in person with someone. So just thinking outside of the box. And for my team meetings, we do a question of the week. And I mean, even that is just setting the tone. It's so fun. You get to learn about your coworkers in like a very quick way. So doing something like that is good. And then I think, also think about what you're doing before the meeting. The Slido tool I gave as an example earlier is really great. You can give people thought starters, have them ask questions ahead of time so that, people aren't just going into the meeting having to come up with things on the spot. You give, again, the introverts especially, time to think ahead of time about what they want to say, what questions they have. So I think as much as you can kind of have some of that pre-work ahead of the actual meeting, that will also ensure that the meeting itself is productive and useful for people.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really excellent. And I love the idea of asking a question because it can be really weird feeling when you're like, I mean, I do this a lot. Like, we need a fun fact. Like, is there a fun fact you'd like to share with the group? And I can hear the eye rolls from here, y'all.
Yeah.
Like, truly, it's the worst, right? Like, share
a
fun fact.
One, yeah.
No, I don't like fun. That's my fun fact.
Yeah.
Nothing about me is fun. But asking a question does give that prompt and does kind of lend a little bit more structure to the question, and probably kind of takes the pressure off people to feel like they need to come up with something cool or fun to share. If the question is like, first concert, best concert. Sorry, y'all. I just rewatched Ted Lasso within the last 2 weeks. So, I'm going to be dropping a lot of that lately. But yeah, like, I think it's really a really great idea to try and kind of, give people a direction to go in.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. We did actually have another question that came in the chat. This person had asked, what do you think is a good strategy to keep people from multitasking during meetings? I also struggle with this. What do you recommend? Have you seen anything be effective in the past?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people end up multitasking because the presenter is probably just talking to you the whole time and not, again, inviting that engagement and not giving you a reason to participate. So you saw when in my short presentation, I asked for moments for you to jump into the chat. Like having what I like to call state changes is really important. So not me just talking the whole time, but changing it up. Maybe I play a video, maybe I ask a question, maybe I ask you to write something down, or I insert a poll. So providing those moments to break up the monotony of just one person talking is really important because to your point, like our brains get used to things very easily. So you need to kind of stimulate, we're in the TikTok era now, you need to stimulate people in order to keep their attention.
Ooh, there we go. All right. So let's kind of talk about some of the ways that you might need to prepare for these meetings. I feel like a lot of people, when we started into the virtual space, thought like, oh, this is so crazy. We're gonna have to redo everything. And as we hopefully all kind of sort of learned in increments, it's not really that different or hard. It's just, you have to make certain different preparations that you maybe wouldn't have to think about. So when we're talking about prepping for a hybrid meeting, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when they are setting this up?
I think with the move both to remote and hybrid now, well, first with remote, it was just so easy to schedule meetings back to back to back to back because you're just always sitting in your chair. And I think as we move to hybrid, um, we kind of kept that bad meeting habit where we just schedule meetings anytime there's something on our mind that we need to discuss. So I really think the preparation part is key. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing. And, people go into a meeting or schedule a meeting thinking, okay, I want to talk about this topic. And they go in and then it's like, okay, what about this topic? Like it's so broad. There's so many different facets that you can ask about. And so I like to always, again, with the deadlines too, like just be really specific. So what about this topic do you want to answer? You want to know about the challenges that engineering will face. You want to know like how will this impact SEO? You want to know, which other stakeholders need to be in the know about this. And so just to get specific to guide the conversation is really key. And that's what you have to do. You have to prepare ahead of time to make sure that the meeting time that you do have is actually useful, and your team will know, like as you start preparing more, as you realize, oh, I don't actually need this live meeting, I can just send some materials ahead of time for people to review. People will start appreciating that you do only have meetings when you really need the meeting and that you're actually prepared for them. People are going to pay more attention.
Yeah, I think that you make a really good point there, which is like a lot of people seem to not really prepare for the meeting until they're in the meeting.
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
right. It's like they didn't think through like, okay, we're going to have a meeting. I want to talk through these things and, whatever. It's like they get there and you can kind of tell, right? You
Yeah,
can see it on their face that they're sort of formulating how we're going to go through this.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
I love that. I love that idea of like, thinking in advance what you want to accomplish so that you can really maximize the time, that you have people in front of you.
Yeah, and it's all about respecting your colleagues' time too, right? I mean, we all hate going to meetings where we feel like the person's unprepared, just a waste of everyone's time. So it's just showing respect to your teammates too.
Yeah. Oh, yes, 100%. Okay. So we had a lot of people that had questions kind of still around this idea, right? About, how to keep people from multitasking, keep people engaged. One of the questions I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
In your opinion, do you think it is necessary, or there are situations where it's advisable to encourage the audience to, turn on their microphones or turn on their cameras? Like, do you think there are situations where this is really, kind of the best practice or the best option?
I think so. Not every meeting has to have video on, so I do a lot of one-on-one catch-up with my colleagues, and so for those, sometimes I'll suggest phone calls. But for group meetings where you're trying to get that interaction and engagement, I think having cameras on is important because you want to see their face. And I'm sure we've all been on those Zoom calls where we have the like the Zoom profile picture and they're talking and you're just like staring at their picture and just like it's hard to kind of stay engaged and stay focused. But when you can see their face, I mean, you just see so much more and you get so much out of it. And I know people might be uncomfortable sometimes. So I like to just suggest, calling out that it's not necessarily a required thing, but it is really nice to see their faces, to kind of get that feedback. And I think Meg and you and the other moderators on Chat and Learns do this super well and just, are very understanding and empathetic that there are reasons why people might not want to turn on their cameras, but if you can and you're up for it, like it really benefits the speakers.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's something that absolutely we talk about, with our speakers prior to chats, and truly all like Zoom fatigue is absolutely real. And as somebody who does this 3 to 5 days a week, I love y'all. There are days I don't want to do this. There are days where I'm like, couldn't I just host from my couch though? Like a podcast? They won't care. Everybody can be comfortable. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, I love this idea of kind of calling out, not just saying like, hey, if you want to turn your cameras on, that'd be super great. But like highlighting what you're hoping to accomplish with that, like if you're in a brainstorming session and you're used to doing that in like a roundtable kind of format, then yeah, like having camera and audio on to facilitate that, like, to kind of mimic as much as we can that in-person feeling makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Do you think it's worth it to give that like kind of breakdown to people? Like, hey, I want us to all be on camera so that we can do such and such, or because it'll help with this task? Or do you think that's maybe too granular?
I think it's great. I think again, I think not just with video calls, but just in life, anytime you make an ask of something, it's always good to give the reason behind it. Even, in my apartment building, when people are asking if anyone has a free parking spot, like when you give a reason behind it, I feel like people are more willing to, share their spot with you. So I think anytime you have the reasoning, it's always good.
Yeah. Okay. Now, do you have any examples of like language that you use to try and encourage people to come on, turn their cameras on or come off mute? I feel like I tend to, I mean, granted, I do this a lot, so I have kind of the same like set of standard things that I say, but
Yeah.
I feel like that ask is really awkward for a lot of people. Do you have phrasing that you use?
Not necessarily go-to phrasing. I think what I'll usually just say something along the lines of, "I understand there are, many reasons why you might not want to turn on your camera, but it would be really great to see your face. It helps me, know what's resonating with you, and I want to make this session as helpful as possible for you. And people are spending their time to tune in, so I would hope they're trying to get the most out of it as well. So yeah, just encouraging them again, letting them know, why it would help both me and them to do so.
Yeah, I like that. Elizabeth is chiming in the chat saying, "I love sharing the reason to have cameras on. I used to think the presenter only wanted to control us and watch us." Um, and honestly, that's truly like a pretty common thought, right? Because a lot of people were
Yeah.
not, your boss didn't have a window onto your desk while you were having this meeting. So
Hmm.
it's totally understandable that it's kind of a weird concept for people, especially if you made that switch in the pandemic.
Hmm.
And it really does help, like there's plenty of times where I have meetings and I will turn my camera on because it helps me to keep myself focused and keep myself on track.
Hmm.
But like I don't expect other people to do it. And I call that out. Like, hey, I'm on camera because I need to be like, I need that external help to focus.
Yeah.
But I don't expect you to be on camera. You don't have to be on camera. Please don't apologize for your appearance. It is fine.
Hmm.
Like, that's I really do enjoy seeing people start to get a little more comfortable with that and realize like you don't have to be Instagram perfect just because it's a lens pointed at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. Allie is also loving the 5-second pause, that it's really great for positive peer pressure.
It
As
is. It
someone,
is.
as someone very uncomfortable with silence, I can 100% tell you that works. 100%.
Yeah.
So Davina had said in the chat, "I struggle when the presenter has a reputation with ineffective meetings or admitting that we're having a meeting because we have to have a meeting." I think these are definitely things that resonate with a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
What are some other facilitator mistakes that make people not want to participate or not want to go to these meetings? We've shared a lot of different options or a lot of, kind of different points here, but are there any others that stand out in your mind as like, absolutely, that is going to turn people off?
Hmm. Well, I alluded to this one earlier today, but anytime someone is giving a status update, that should be an immediate prompt to be like, I think this can be sent async. And I think I'm not sure if if all of you know what asynchronous communication is, but basically asynchronous is communication that is not dependent on an immediate response. So things like email, for example, you're not expecting someone to respond that second, but maybe a chat program, you would imagine there's a little bit more immediate back and forth. So anytime there's something like a status update, which I think is the main offender, send that async instead. Record a video, send it to your team, and then if people have questions, then schedule the live meeting to follow up with that. Or you might find that people are just perfectly fine with, slacking or chatting their questions and getting the responses from you that way. But I think trying to be more creative with, it sounds like this person is not doing a good job choosing which meetings they want to be live. But if you can kind of encourage or at least model that behavior, you'll start seeing your coworkers really appreciate it, and hopefully others follow suit.
I like that. Okay. Like, all right, so we talked a little bit about prepping before meetings. Do you think there are steps that should be followed before a meeting starts? Is there like a checklist that people should make sure they're hitting?
I think the tips I shared earlier are really the key ones. So, an agenda, a goal, rules of engagement. You might also ask, depending on what type of meeting it is, you might ask the people who are going to be attending the meeting, do they have anything else to add to the agenda? Do they have ideas for what they want to discuss? So, making it more of kind of a collaborative thing instead of you just being the organizer and just kind of telling everyone what to do. But again, it depends on the type of meeting. I know for my team meetings, I like to get the input from everyone to make it feel more of a communal meeting and not just me, sharing whatever I think is important. So I think that would be another good thing to consider.
Yeah, I like that. I like that suggestion a lot. Okay. We got a lot of questions from people that had concerns about technology.
Mhm.
One person had said, I'm 55 years old and I feel like technology has kind of outpaced my skills. How
Mhm.
can I take advantage when using virtual at my age with my skill set? I think this
Mhm.
is a really great question. A lot of people did not come up in any way having to deal with, with video being part of their working lives. I mean, I didn't even have it part of my working life until I was
Yeah.
33, and
Mhm.
I'm still on the younger side of the spectrum. So like, there's a huge portion of the working population that might really feel uncomfortable with this.
Mhm.
Do you have any suggestions for people that feel like that?
Yeah, so there's actually someone on my team who I feel like is was uncomfortable with Slack to start because his just profession, his background just wouldn't need some sort of chat program like that. And so I think what's really helpful is either going to your manager or finding kind of a buddy on your team who is maybe more familiar or more comfortable and just going through your questions with them and just having someone guide you. And so for that Slack thing I mentioned earlier, I just wrote down all my, favorite tips and tricks, and then we just got on a video call together. I went through them. I feel like he got a lot out of it. And then something else you might want to recommend is if you have a learning and development arm at your company, just suggesting to them that this could be something useful for the whole company. And I'm sure there are others who are also feeling the same way. So, kind of taking the lead and seeing if there's some sort of training or something you can bring, I think would be a good idea as well.
I love that. Now just asking, kind of not devil's advocate, but like asking for, just further info. Do you think this is something that's pretty easily Googleable? Like, do you think there are resources and references out there to walk you through, like if you're not sure how to, how to set up your camera and that kind of thing?
Mhm.
Do you think this is something that's easily Googleable, or do people need to maybe be worried about where they're getting their tips from if they're going outside of this?
Yeah, I think definitely there's probably, I mean, since the pandemic, like so many, so many materials out there, and actually it might be, overwhelming to have so many. So, you know, I mentioned my newsletter earlier. I just like to keep it really simple. So, feel free to reach out to me through there if there's something specific you're wondering about. But I feel like finding, whether it's me or someone else, just finding people out there who are talking about these topics, who keep things simple, who aren't, it's very cool to see the experts out there who have all the live streaming and the different lights and da da da. But I mean, I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible while still having impact. So if you can find those people, maybe on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and follow them and their work, I think that's another good way to keep learning.
Yeah, I like that. And I can absolutely second, what you said earlier about like just asking questions, asking for
Mhm.
help. If there's
Mhm.
somebody on your team that is really good at, seems to be very like comfortable on video, ask them, hey, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm a little bit nervous with this. Like, can you give me some pointers or something?
Mhm.
People love to help, y'all. They really do.
Oh,
And
yeah,
telling
that's
somebody that you think they're good at something, whew, oh, that is like magic sauce. And people will talk to you about anything if you're
yeah,
like start with like, I think you're really good at blah blah blah. Can you help me?
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So
Whew.
yeah, such good advice.
I love to feel like I know what's going on. Okay, we had another question come in the chat. Allie had asked, when you're talking about the hand raise rule that you had mentioned for engagement,
Mhm.
what does that look like for in-person participants versus virtual when you're in a hybrid space? This is a really good ask, right? So when you're
Yeah,
talking about something that has a different meaning, like raise your hand virtually versus in person,
yeah.
what, should you set ground rules for that? Like, are there
Mhm.
expectations?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So the thing with hybrid meetings, and I think kind of the best practice suggestion right now that I've experienced that I've been reading about is that even when you are in person together, you all want to be on your laptops. And so essentially the rule is if one person is dialing into the meeting, everyone should be dialing in. Now that does not mean that you can't all be in the same room together. You all still can be, but you'll still want to have your laptops in front of you. Everyone mute their microphones and just have one central microphone working so that there's not that sound feedback. And then you're going to just, use the hand raise feature on whatever video platform you're using, similar to if you were to be remote. And that way it just levels the playing field. Everyone is literally the same size on the screen, so everyone has an equal amount of space that they're taking up. And yeah, and I think that's the best way that people have found so far. And I know at Slack they do this cool thing where they actually put laptop stands in conference rooms at each seat. So it's kind of that trigger to remind you, oh, okay, I need to be on my laptop if I'm in a hybrid meeting.
I like that. Oh, I'm trying to think of like the last kind of like brick and mortar place that I worked. Like we would go to conference rooms for meetings, and I can't tell you how many times people are like they wanted to show their computer, like show their screen up on our projector or whatever, but like only one person brought their laptop, or you know what I mean? Like stuff that is like, I really wish we could be going over this, like, and making the changes you're talking about, but no one's in front of their desktop. So like, I really very much enjoy that idea. And y'all, it never hurts to ask, like when we do like the virtual job fairs, we've got people that are raising their hands, like, in the Zoom, and then we've got people that are sending in questions in the Zoom chat. So, it never hurts to ask and be like, hey, how are we going to handle this? Is, are the in-person, are the raise hand, like video people going to get,
priority, like
thank you. I kept thinking precious treatment, and that was not what I wanted. But yeah, like, kind of asking for those ground rules, because the person might not have thought about it either.
Exactly.
So definitely helpful to ask. All right. Do you think that it is important to have a background that catches the audience's attention? I've gone over, like, I think I've been through 3 or 4 different backgrounds, probably in the last several months. But what do you think about when it comes to backgrounds?
Yeah, and Meg and I, we talked about this last time I gave my presentation, but I think having a nice curated background is really important. And I remember, Meg, you made this point, it's this small space. You don't have to have the most beautiful home, like just a small space in the window. Try to make it look, as professional and as curated as possible. And I think it does make a difference. Hopefully you see mine and you think, okay, she's, reasonably put together. She's neat, and so it does, subconsciously or consciously, like people look at your background and they make a judgment. So I think as much as you can kind of curate and make it fit your personality and the kind of vibe you want to give off, I think is great.
I like that. And just, if for anybody that's looking into like super quick tips, putting a plant in your background, it's a realtor trick. It makes the space kind of look alive and not so like an empty room behind you. Lorraine is absolutely right. I think I've got, what are we looking at here? Probably 4 feet of wall space cleared, and y'all would not believe the wreck that is the rest of my office right now, like truly. So, you don't need to have a very fancy setup. There's nothing wrong with a virtual background. That's totally fine. Not everybody is resourced enough or has the good lighting to be able to be on camera. Like, totally get it. All right. What else do you think that people should be preparing besides a presentation as you are getting, like, revved up and ready to host a meeting?
Well, I actually think the presentation is, well, it's funny because I talked about the meeting part. I didn't talk about the presentation part as much here, but a good presentation is also really important. I mean, presentations are a cornerstone to our meetings. And so, being thoughtful about the content, again, if there's a way that you can send the content ahead of time so that the live meeting is kind of more of that engaging brainstorming question session, I think is the ideal. But I think just coming to the meeting, again, prepared, thinking about what the goal is, what you want to have come out of it is really key. And it sounds simple, but so many people aren't doing it. And that's why we keep having so many meetings getting added to the calendar and people are experiencing that fatigue. So the presentation is key. Use visuals like I'm using here if you can, not too much text. Move through it fairly quickly is another tip I like to share. Same with your meetings. If you're sharing content, you don't want to stick on one subject for too long. Again, our brains get used to things very easily. So if you want to keep people excited, keep people interested, you just want to keep moving through whatever it is that you're sharing.
I like that. And y'all, I'm sharing a link in the chat thread here right now. That's going to take you to our platform, and it's a quick search of our past chats with Lorraine. So you can see the one that we did pretty recently, which was all about like there was a huge section on presentations, things to include and what, best practices, all kinds of stuff. So I absolutely recommend, if you are curious more, want more information about the presentation aspect of virtual and hybrid meetings, like absolutely click that link, check out her videos. I've never had a bad chat with Lorraine. You always learn something amazing. So,
Thanks.
so absolutely, like put them on the background, treat it like a podcast, whatever you want to do, but they're really, really great information in there. Okay. We're coming down into kind of the last 10 minutes of our event. So I'm going to try and get to as many questions as we can. If you still have a question, please feel free to send it in. We'll try and get to it. But thank you so much for all the questions that y'all submitted thus far. All right. One person had wanted to know if we've all been in those meetings where like everything seems to be going great. You're presenting, it's awesome. But then suddenly there's a drop off in participation. Can you think of any way to like either, is this something that we should address, or should we just be proactive and use one of the, the things that we talked about earlier as like ways to kind of get people to participate? How would you handle this?
I think if a meeting is going well, I guess it's rare that I see a meeting is going well and then something wrong happens. But what I would say is if your meeting, it doesn't feel quite right, it isn't how you wanted it to be, is really asking for that feedback afterwards. And I mentioned that tool in the hybrid toolkit, Poly. It's a polling tool. And so getting feedback, and again, being specific with those questions, not just, how was the meeting? Was it good? Was it bad? But, from a scale of 1 to 5, did you feel like there were enough opportunities for you to chime in? If not a 5, explain why. How did I do facilitating the meeting? Did you feel like topics were focused, or did you feel like we were going off track? So just getting really specific with those questions, and hopefully you have a team that's comfortable being honest with you and giving you constructive feedback. But I think that's the best way, kind of retroactively, to understand what might have gone wrong, and then for you to just take that information and to improve for the future. So I know it's kind of scary and uncomfortable asking for feedback, but especially when it comes to meetings, I think it's super helpful.
Oh yeah, great. Okay, we have some really awesome questions, so we're trying to get through as many as we can, but this one I thought was really interesting. This person wanted to know if you have advice on how to look and feel comfortable when you're hosting a meeting. They said, I feel like I'm shy in person, and that translates to Zoom. What do you recommend for this?
Oh yeah, such a good question. And I'm sure many other people are experiencing this as well, so I appreciate you asking. I think there's a few things. So when I talk about getting more confident on camera, I like to think of a few different things. So one is lighting. So you can see my lighting is pretty good right now. Imagine if I, was like this. It's like, I don't look so good, but more professional, more put together. So lighting is a super easy fix. So I have a softbox in front of me. Those are those big photo device or lighting devices you see in photo studios, and then I have 2 ring lights on either side of me, so that helps me feel more confident. A good webcam is really helpful, so I have the Logitech Brio 4K camera. Keeps me looking sharp and prepared and professional again. Using visuals on screen is actually really helpful. If you're just talking and there's, let's see if I can, no visuals on screen, and everyone's just like staring at me, and it feels like a lot of pressure. But anytime I use visuals, people are so excited, especially, people outside of Prezi who aren't used to seeing it. They're like, what are you using? And oh, that's so cool. And like that in itself gives me a nice confidence boost as well. And then one other thing is, now that we're virtual, like one of the best things that come out of it is that you can use notes and have them on your computer. And so don't hesitate to use those. I have some presenter notes right now on top of my Prezi video application that I'm using, and those are super helpful and guiding me and keeping me on track. So definitely do that. Or pictures of people who make you comfortable, who make you smile, just put those around your camera as well. Another benefit to virtual. So I think all those things hopefully will give you a nice confidence boost.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Very, very much second the can't like photos of people around, like stuff that makes you happy surrounding you is excellent. Feel comfortable, like physically comfortable. Are you sitting in a really uncomfortable chair? Are your pants like riding up in a way that you're just like, ugh? like
Yeah.
handling little stuff like that can really, really help. The other question that we got that I think is kind of plays into this really well, this will probably be the last one we get to.
Sure.
Let's talk about ways to get people excited and engaged for a call. This person had written in with the question, specifically talking about like meetings that happen Monday morning, where, depending on the energy of the group, it's either going to help pump people up or like kind of everybody's just going to be stuck in the blah.
Yeah. So I would say that my best suggestion, or what I've tried so far that has worked really well, is play fun music, pump up music, and then have a question at the start that's relevant to whatever's going, or maybe not even relevant to what's going on in the world. But so my team has had questions like, if around the time of the Summer Olympics, if you had to compete in one of the sports, like which one would you compete in? So just all those like fun questions that kind of make you think outside the box, I think are a really good way to get that energy going. And then I'm sure there's fun things you could do as well, like a little game to start. Maybe like a poll with a fun quiz question. So I think, again, just anything kind of outside the box, because so many people are just staying in the box. Even if you just go a little outside of the box, I feel like you're going to make a big impact already. But it's great that you're thinking about this. I'm sure your team is going to appreciate you wanting to come in with that extra energy. So you're already much further than many people.
Yes. Oh, thank you for asking this. But yeah, I think it's a really good point. The pump up music, I do it before I get on chats. So it's definitely something that makes me not necessarily makes me more comfortable, but kind of puts me in that mindset. Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to flag before before time runs out, you had talked about like, the lighting that you use, and that is so awesome. As somebody who started doing this without the big setup, you can use like truly you can use lights from around your house. You can use lamps. You can like
Lamps, yeah.
And because nobody's going to see, like I have a stool in this corner. I have a stack of books on top of a shelf, like to set these, to set them up where I want them or where they work for me. So like you don't have to spend a ton of money on this to get some good changes for yourself, like, to upgrade what you're looking like. So just keep that in mind, y'all. You don't have to spend a bunch of money to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Oh, last thing I thought of, if you're looking for icebreaker questions, you can Google them. You don't have to be the clever person that thinks up fun questions. Google them. No one will care. I touch on pets are a good question to ask, like pets and animals, or food, because they're topics that either lower people's, like they're kind of lower your guard because you're getting ready to talk about fun stuff. And food naturally does that as well. So, even if it's like, one of my favorites is, what's the best sandwich you've ever eaten?
Oh,
And I've also had people be like, okay, but what qualifies as a sandwich? And I'm like, now we're talking.
Yeah.
Because now you got people engaged.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Lorraine, what do you want to leave our audience with today? If there's anything they have to take away, do not leave this session without knowing blank.
I mean, I just hope that you all feel more excited about meetings and the impact that you can have if you do them well. And again, just feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, subscribe to my newsletter for more tips, and just let me know how things are going. If you implement any of the tips today, I would love to hear it. And just good luck, and great for all of you for kind of taking that time to really learn about this topic.
Oh, yes. Excellent. I shared some links in the chat thread in case y'all, want to check out some of our upcoming events, get you some options for different resources and stuff. Don't forget, we've got a summit. Our September summit is happening the 12th through the 15th. There's a virtual job fair on the 15th as well. So check out those links that I shared there. If you've joined us today and this was your first Power to Fly event, I hope you had a wonderful time. It was really great to meet you, and I can't wait to see you again. If you are one of our frequent flyers, thank you, y'all. Truly, it's like I get to check in with friends when I sign in and see our familiar people logging in for the chat. So really, y'all make my day when you show up for these things. Truly, so thank you so much for the participation, for the questions, for showing up. Like, this is absolutely wonderful. We really, really, really appreciate it. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. If we don't see you before the weekend, I hope you have a safe, happy, healthy time. And we can't wait to see you back here on another chat soon. Bye, y'all.